Zach LaVine has what I believe is his most mature and in-depth interview with Vincent Goodwill that we're going to talk a lot about on today's show. We're also going to look at the Josh Giddey gamble is what it's being called right now, and Josh Giddey's performance through his first games here in Chicago and the challenge that Billy Donovan actually laid out for Josh Giddey. And we're going to preview the game tonight going down when the Bulls take on the Hawks. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go to get into the content for today, man. And I want to start off with this Vincent Goodwill interview with Zach LaVine. I'm going to read a lot of quotables from this one, but I think that most people will see, like, this is the most mature that I think we've ever seen Zach LaVine. And that's not to call him immature before, but it seems to be a level of calmness about Zach LaVine's situation. And I'm sure I'm going to speculate on why that could be a little bit here going forward into the future, but I want to stick to the facts here first. And this one, like, it just starts off with this. When he was asked about hearing all the talk around him this offseason and last year, he said this: I heard everything. I read everything. Sometimes you got to take the accountability and put the chip on your shoulder. There's a lot of things people said I had to prove. I think my resume speaks for itself. The type of player I am, the type of person I am, but it is what it is. You can always turn some heads. When asked about, how everybody looks at him, he said this: I don't know. It's not for me to try to make everybody like me. I'm happy for what I got, what I deserve. And people may not feel that way, and you may judge it off that. But regardless, I know who I am, and I know what I've done in this league. And that is something that I think kind of the more fair analysis has been done over Zach LaVine's career. Like, when you look at kind of since last season of him going down, or the trade rumors till, started off this season and how he started the season off so far, a lot of people really tore down Zach LaVine's game. And while Zach LaVine has always been one of the best scorers in the league, of course, they looked at his defense. They looked at, what they perceived as negatives about his game or his attitude, his relationship with Billy Donovan, saying that he was a bad teammate, these type of things that come up. And as a player that's been through the things that Zach LaVine has been through, right? When I had the episode, I think that was Monday, and I asked, how will Zach LaVine be remembered? It was because of the perception around Zach LaVine and how that doesn't really match what he's brought to this team. And look at the records that he holds as a Chicago Bull. And he did it in a lot less time than the people ahead of him. But again, even with that said, he missed games over that time, right? The injuries, the contract, right? And I think a lot of the perception around Zach LaVine changed when he got his contract, right? When he got that max level extension from the Chicago Bulls. And, I can understand that to a degree, right? I think that that's fair. When you sign that type of money, the largest money in Chicago Bulls history, that's what that contract was. It's going to come with a different level of scrutiny. And when you're then on court performance with your injuries and things like that, keep you from being on the court, or you're trying to mesh with DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, and the team just wasn't winning on top of giving him that contract, it's naturally going to bring in a more kind of stringent view around him, right? And Zach LaVine through this also talked about and was asked about his time with DeMar. He said this: I had plenty of games where I had to take over, but the respect you give to DeMar DeRozan, you don't want to take away from what he does. I had to take a step back off the ball because you don't put DeMar in the corner. It's not going to be what's best for him or the team. I can play off ball. I've seen how DeMar plays in the fourth quarter and how he calms down. And just for me, a learning experience, I tip my hat to DeMar. I love DeMar, and there's a lot of work I put into this too. And yeah, Zach had to change his game to play with DeMar DeRozan. Vooch had to change his game to play with DeMar DeRozan, right? There's no questions that. And I do think, and again, this isn't to blame it as a negative on DeMar. You do have to change the way that you play to play with a player like DeMar. The Sacramento Kings have gone through it at the beginning of this season now. You have to play a certain way to maximize the skill set of what DeMar DeRozan brings to the team. You just do. And I think it's something to be said that we're now seeing some of the best basketball in Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic's time here with the Chicago Bulls after DeMar left because, it's just simplicity. DeMar and Vooch operated the same spaces. DeMar needed to be heavily on ball, right? And while Zach LaVine still isn't an extremely ball-dominant player now with this new phase of the team, I think it's something to be said that the wing position, the 2 and the 3, are now him and Kobe instead of him and DeMar, both players that can extend their game out to the 3-point range. And so this is just another level of kind of that maturity that we heard from Zach, that we're seeing from Zach LaVine. And you got to love to see that. And I think it does bring a level of clarity when it comes down to it as well. And Zach LaVine for it right now, he's playing above 51% shooting from the field, 43% shooting from 3-point range. Those are career highs for Zach LaVine right now. And he's performing at a way that I think is turning a lot of heads. And Zach LaVine talked as well about, being the veteran on this team, right? And what comes with being the veteran on a younger team and how he's relishing in that role. And so he's also the longest tenured Bull, him and Kobe, right? But he's been in the league a lot longer than Kobe. So this is a Zach LaVine that has a level of calmness and poise about him. And that's extending on the court and off the court. And of course, he was asked about the trades and things like that. And he talked about how that's out of his control and everything. And that's the way that Zach LaVine needs to focus on it and play. Everything has to come down to on the court, right? Regardless of whatever Zach LaVine's goals are, whether his goal is to be here in Chicago or not be here in Chicago, whatever that is, whatever him in the front office has talked about, that's on them. But Zach is playing with the chip on the shoulder right now, and it's a chip that's pushing him to be more efficient. That's pushing him to play at a more confidence, and you're seeing that here, right? This isn't just a fluff piece. This is what's indicative of what we're seeing from Zach LaVine on the basketball court. And Zach even saying you can always turn some heads, right? Now, people are going to read into that to say what that means as far as his trade, going on and whatever. This is one of the few articles that I will tell everybody to go out there and read on Yahoo Sports by Vincent Goodwill. It's honestly one of the best interviews that I have ever seen with Zach LaVine. One of the most open that Zach LaVine has been in his career now, the past, the maybe even the future with trades. And the way that Zach does need to handle this, I think, is that it's not in his control. It's not. What is in control is what's on the basketball court. What's in his control is his relationship with his teammates. Whether Zach is moved because this front office wants to move on, or whether Zach LaVine is asking for it and wants to move as well. Whatever the story is, it doesn't matter the whys. If that does happen, it's out of his control. He can't trade himself, right? And Zach LaVine even saying this, I'm in a good place. I feel sharp now. Being able to be one of the veteran guys on this team and still be able to do what I do. Help win in a way, defense one day, facilitating whatever they call for. And that is exactly what we're seeing from Zach LaVine. He is on pace to have his best defensive season of his career. And to do that when you're approaching 30 is a huge step for a player that has been looked at as a largely one-way player. And not looked at, he has been a one-way player. Let me not throw any bail. He's been a one-way player primarily for his career here with Chicago. He's had moments, he's had times where he's definitely stepped it up defensively, but it's about taking it to the next level. And if Zach LaVine could do that and continue to just grow and develop, we'll see, right? We'll see. He said this to end it. I've gone through ups and downs with that. I've really had some good games, good years, and years. I've had some times where I've had plenty of turnovers and some bad games. And I think that's what that's all with the experience of being in the NBA. I'm in a good spot and understanding what the game means for me at the time and how I'm trying to contribute to winning. And that last quote, how this article ends, contribute to winning, right? I think that's an important part because that was one of the biggest questions for Zach LaVine in this offseason. Does he contribute to winning? Does his game contribute to winning? And so far through the season, even though the Bulls haven't won at a high level, I think people will be hard-pressed to say that Zach LaVine is not out there playing winning basketball because of the effort that he's given on both sides of the ball. And I still see people leave comments like, oh, well, Zach doesn't do anything defensively. And I'm like, you can't possibly be watching this season of Zach LaVine. Now, if you want to have the conversation about historically over his career, that's different. But if you're watching Zach LaVine and the player that he's been this year, you can't deny that Zach LaVine is extremely locked in defensively this season. This is the most consistently locked in, where we've seen it in spurts over Zach LaVine's career. It's been fairly consistent this entire season that Zach LaVine is in on the rotations. Now, this team still has some problems defensively, but let's be clear, right? And the numbers back this up. Despite the Bulls being a terrible defensive team this season, all right, they're giving up, I think, now the most points in the NBA, but the Bulls, when Zach LaVine is on the court, are giving up 5.8 points less per 100 possessions. That puts Zach LaVine in the 79th percentile. You know the highest he's ever ranked in his career other than that? 59th. And that was the Bulls giving up 0.9 points less when he was on the court. So it's still very fair, very almost even there. So this is a player in Zach LaVine that is having the biggest impact. When you look at the effective field goal percentage, when Zach LaVine's on the court, the teams are shooting at 5.7% less effective field goal shooting percentage when Zach LaVine is on the court. The free throw rate's down. The offensive rebounding rate for the other team is down because he's rebounding pretty well offensively. Zach LaVine is having his most complete season as a player. That's what I'll call it. And in the midst of having this most complete season, whether that leads to Zach LaVine being moved or not, we'll have a conversation about when or if that happens. But Zach LaVine right now is focused on proving his doubters wrong. And for the most part, it's hard to argue that he's not doing that. Now, from one Bulls player to another one that wants to start proving some people wrong, and that's Josh Giddey. This has become such a hot button topic that I honestly did not expect for it to turn into this hot of a topic in regards to Josh Giddey. Like, yes, I always knew that there was going to be scrutiny around the Josh Giddey trade, right? We all knew that. It was there from day one because you traded Alex Caruso, who was a beloved player, a defensive player, a player that given a lot of effort. And by the way, for those who try to knock Alex Caruso, have you not seen the game that Alex Caruso played with Isaiah Hartenstein being back? They were a good duo out there coming off that bench. Nonetheless, though, like it was always going to be some tough scrutiny. Then you add in the stuff around Josh Giddey that has nothing to do with the game of basketball on top of his own deficiencies on the basketball court. And naturally, you're going to get a player that is going to be scrutinized by the Chicago Bulls media and fan base. It's just going to happen, right? I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. And through this season so far for Josh Giddey, through the 16 games played, he started all 16. He's averaged 27 minutes per game, which is the second highest in his career. He's averaged basically 12 points, 11.8 points, 40% from the field, which is a career low for him. But he's averaging a career high from three at 35%, taking 3.7 3-pointers per game, 6 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game. But overall, after Josh Giddey's hot start, it's been a mixed bag to say the least, right? And defensively, Josh Giddey's going through it right now. And you got to look at the impact that he's having on the court. Overall, yes, things are a net negative for Josh Giddey. It is what it is, right? That's just the reality of the stats. But the thing is that Josh Giddey does have in his favor is the fact that he's 22 years old. Now, that is not this catch-all statement that people try to make it. Oh, he's 22. Yeah, there are a lot of players that sucked at 22 and stay, and they suck at 36, right? And I'm not saying that that's Josh Giddey. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's not a catch-all just to say, oh, well, he's 22. A lot of 22-year-old players just don't improve because they're not good, right? But the thing is that Josh Giddey, it comes down to really effort for Josh Giddey, right? We know right now teams are averaging 10 more points when Josh Giddey's on the court. And his point differential in the season is negative 11.6. And, it is what it is when it comes down to it. The Bulls are averaging less points when he's on the court. They're averaging less rebounds when he's on the court as well, which is surprising considering he's averaging 6 rebounds per game. But that's what the numbers are objectively telling us, right? Now, when you look at it as well, I love what Billy Donovan laid out a challenge for Josh Giddey. He said this. Is he going to be an elite defender in the NBA? Probably not, which you got to love when he just says things like that. But he did say this. That's crazy. But he did say that the thing that Josh Giddey can improve on, he said, Giddey can master coverage. He can master footwork. He can master, I'm 6'8". I don't need to close all the way out. I need to try to figure out my foot speed. I don't need to get blown by. He has size and IQ, and I do think he's got way more. He's gotten way more physical he's got to get way more physical in my opinion. No, it's not going to be much better. I would liken it to he's got to become an expert in coverages. He's got to be really good, great, and detailed oriented in that. And I love the fact that Billy Donovan not only said, no, he's not going to be a good defender. He hasn't been a good defender, but hey, this is how he can become a solid defender, right? And I think that's adamant, right? It really does a lot come down to effort when you look at defensively. And a lot's been made about Josh Giddey's defense after Doris Burke completely killed him on the national media. It is what it is when it comes down to that. There's a lot of basketball fans that don't have League Pass, that aren't in Chicago, so they're not going to have CHSN. So most of their opinions come from these national media pundits. Now, I don't agree with that by any stretch of the imagination. I think everybody should try to educate themselves and go and form their own opinions, but that's the nature that comes with the sport. Everybody doesn't have the time to invest so much time into finding their own opinion and things like that. But what Billy Donovan laid out here, the challenge that Billy Donovan laid out, is figuring out his foot speed, right? Figuring out coverages. These are IQ things. And that is one thing that even the biggest, person who, Josh Giddey hater can admit and can see the dude has basketball IQ. That's just that he has the IQ. The problem is that sometimes you have to use, and at 22 years old, you're still trying to do things physically, right? And you see players that get to the point to where the mental aspect of the game start using that more than the physical, right? And while Josh Giddey has physical attributes in his size and his height that can definitely help him, he's gonna have to do that. Like becoming a master of coverages, becoming a master of foot speed. That's something that I really like that Billy Donovan laid out here for Josh Giddey. It's giving him a path of, hey, this is what I can do to be better in these areas. And yes, the time is on the side for Josh Giddey. He's 22 years old. He has a lot of time to figure out who and what he can be to overcome some of his limitations here in Chicago or in the NBA. We'll see how long that time in Chicago is. But I think if Josh Giddey does that, right, and this matches the thing that Billy Donovan laid out before for all the players, asking, like, how much tape are you watching? What are you doing when you're at home or in the hotel room to help give you an advantage and an edge when you take on these other teams? Those are things that Billy Donovan laid out, and that is extended here to Josh Giddey as well. The circus around Josh Giddey and the coverage from the national media, from Bulls media people, from Bulls fans, it's not going to stop. I'm going to tell you right now. I don't care. Josh Giddey can average 16, 10, and 8 for the rest of the season, and a lot of it is still going. It's not like the one thing for my Australian viewers and listeners that have joined the show that follow Josh Giddey. Here's what I'm going to tell you. A lot of times with Chicago Bulls fans and Chicago Bulls media, once they pick that narrative, it stays throughout the whole season. They may change it in the offseason after they take some time out and listen to some numbers and things like that. Even then, sometimes it doesn't change. Look at the Vooch situation, right? It really is just now changing for Vooch. But Josh Giddey right now is the player that people are pinpointing on. He just is. It is what it is. And as that continues to develop, like, it's going to be a thing until he shuts him up. And that can shut him up with performances. He can shut him up with stepping up his game. And we'll see what Josh Giddey can do. But right now, the gamble that the Bulls took on Josh Giddey is not paying off in the way that I'm sure that they thought that it would. Right now, like when you look at it, when the on-off numbers, and again, these are objective numbers, the starters, despite Ayo also being I want to be clear, Ayo is also right now in a down year. The starters and most of the rotation players are playing better when they're on the court with Ayo Dosunmu than Josh Giddey. And actually, Josh Giddey's best lineups is when he's out there with Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, Jalen Smith, Lonzo Ball, with other bench players. So that noise is going to continue to get louder. And we just got to see how much Josh Giddey's going to be able to separate himself from that and how much you grow. It still is an early part of the season. And while in yesterday's episode I said this is more than just a slow start for the team, there are players that are off the slow starts. Ayo and Giddey being the two loudest ones there. And let's see who's going to turn up. Hopefully they both do. And it's something that it helps this team as it goes on in the season. But we do have a game tonight when the Chicago Bulls take on the Atlanta Hawks. And these are two teams that are a lot more similar than what I think a lot of people realize, right? They're both in their offense and defensive struggles. Yes, the Atlanta Hawks right now are technically the 6th seed, but there's only one game that really separates them and the Chicago Bulls. That's how close things are. But when you look at this for offensively, right? Defensively, the Chicago Bulls are 29th in the league, averaging 122.9 points given up per game. The Atlanta Hawks are they're 28th, giving up 119.6 points per game, right, defensively. So they're right there neck and neck defensively. When you take that and flip it and look at it offensively, the Chicago Bulls and the Atlanta Hawks are averaging 115.4 for the Chicago Bulls and 114.9 points per game scored by the Bulls and the Hawks, respectively. The Bulls a little bit better than the Hawks offensively when it comes down to it. Rebounding-wise, the Bulls do blow the Atlanta Hawks out the water when it comes to rebounding. They are averaging 45 rebounds per game. Well, actually, I take that back. The number's updated. The Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls right there next to each other. The Bulls averaging 45 rebounds per game, where the Hawks averaging 44.8. So again, these are two very, very similar basketball teams right now, right? And so while the Hawks have one more win than the Chicago Bulls, you look at them having Trae Young, Jalen Green, DeAndre Hunter, Dyson Daniels playing really good for them as well. The Atlanta Hawks right now have 7 players averaging double figures per game. So that means that they can attack you from all around. That's how the Hawks have won the games that they have won. This is a team that has more balance really than it's ever had before, right? And so the Bulls are going to have to be prepared for this one. You cannot overlook. This is your level of competition, right? This is a team that you have to compete and find your edge with, because I tell you what, the Atlanta Hawks aren't going to make it easy for the Bulls. And while the Bulls do have a win over the Atlanta Hawks already this season, as we know with the Bulls, we saw it with the Milwaukee Bucks, you can take nothing for granted when you're the Chicago Bulls. You have to go into every game prepared. You have to go into every game execute, because you're going to give up points in the paint. You're going to have turnovers. You have to dig in. And if the Bulls can't do that, this Atlanta Hawks team, despite what the Bulls having some earlier season success against the Hawks, they can kill the Chicago Bulls. So let's hope that the Bulls are ready and prepared, because if they're not, the Hawks are about to give them some work. And this game can turn into an ugly game really quick. We're going to need Kobe White, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic to be on their P's and Q's. We need them to be efficient. The scoring balance can be what it is, but we need them to be efficient. And we're going to need contributions from the bench players in Io, Jalen Smith, these type of guys. Torrey Craig, if he does end up playing. We'll see what happens with Kobe and Torrey. They're both listed as questionable for this game. But ultimately, it just comes down to who's going to perform, who's going to contribute, who's going to execute, and who's going to step it up and make the least amount of mistakes. That's what this game is going to come down to for the Hawks. And let's hope that the Bulls are ready. But that's my time for today, guys. I'll be live tonight for the pregame, halftime hangout, and postgame shows, all live on the channel. So if you're on the podcast side, go and hit that subscribe button on the YouTube side. But that's my time for today. Love you guys. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.